Police officers of Reddit. What's the funniest thing someone has done because they were nervous around you? Daughter of a cop. My dad pulled next to a DeLorean at a red light and started having a little chit chat. My dad, being the classic white guy punny dad, trying to be funny, asked, so what happens when you reach 88 miles? And without hesitation whatsoever, he responds, I get a ticket. My friend drove me home once when we were stopped for a routine check. He sipped from a beer once and was so nervous he said, I drank much orange juice, so if you test me positive on alcohol that's because the juice became alcohol in my belly. Maybe too late, but one day I was headed to my station at the end of shift, meaning I stare straight ahead and avoid getting any paperwork to make me stay late. I happened to be behind the same car for maybe 2 miles on the same road. We're sitting at a red light and out of nowhere this dude runs it. Everyone at the intersection looks at me, so of course I stop the dude. Make contact and he can barely hand me his license, he's shaking so bad from being nervous. Ask why he's so scared and he says he saw me behind him and he's on diversion. For running a red light. Also ends up having weed in the car. Yelled I a vegan as he began struggling to remove it from his waistband. Also was carrying marijuana. Couple of colleagues and I were searching a house for weapons after a guy had threatened his mum with a samurai sword. We were in his room, finding knives, swords, a crossbow, when one of my colleagues picks up a cylinder from the bed. I stared at him, gobsmacked, as he held it with his bare, ungloved hands, only to hear him ask, what the fudge is this? Between laughing my ass off and gasping for breath, I managed to tell him it's a fleshlight. He fudges it to get off. Colleague stared at his slimy, recently used prize for a split second before squealing like a pig and launching it across the room. PLZ join my community r askdevites. My dad and I both work for the same PD. This is his story, not minimum. The shift before he had a guy detained for misdemeanor warrants or something. Some junkie comes walking down the road, sees the flashing lights and a cop next to her open back door. He empties his pockets, dumping a pipe, needles, and 5 grams of meth on the hood of his patrol car. He then spreads his legs and puts his hands on the car. My dad was shocked, let the other guy in the back go and took in the guy who just handed over his meth. Apparently not sleeping for 3 days makes you paranoid. I commonly have people hand me their credit card, or some other plastic, when asked for their driver license. I think things that are done purposely have been funnier, like someone looking me in the eyes and purposely pissing their pants. I'm not smoking weed, bro, and even if I was, you wouldn't find out because I'm too good at hiding it. Wife got nervous when a cop pulled up behind her at a traffic light once. When she was pulling away, he turned on his lights and pulled her over. Turns out she absent-mindedly pulled away when the light was still red. No ticket. My nephew, when he was like 7, used to always drop to his shoes and quickly tie them whenever he saw me. Apparently my sister-in-law told him that it's illegal to have your shoes untied. My neighbor's kid used to put on mirrored sunglasses, sit in the driver's seat of their parked SUV, and point a hairdryer out the window so he could keep score of how many speeders slammed on the brakes. Not a police officer, but my dad was driving with me, my brother, my mum and the cat in the carrier to our new house, but he didn't put his seatbelt on because he was stressed or something. Then a police car drove over and asked Dad, guess why I pulled you over? My dad was really nervous and farted loudly, turned around, and blamed it on the cat. The police officer was hysterical and told him to put his seatbelt on and laughed hysterically while driving off. A cop that came to our school to talk about drinking and stuff said that commonly they will catch people driving drunk by pulling next to them and gradually slowing down until they come to a stop. People, when paranoid or under the influence of something, have this idea that they can't pass a police car. Not a cop, but I used to work as an EMT. Drivers who were speeding would sometimes slow down when they would see my ambulance, like I could pull them over or something. Even with no lights or sirens on. I always thought that was hilarious. Also, when running lights and sirens, instead of moving over and letting my ambulance pass, some idiots would slam on fire brakes before moving to the side when I came up behind them, forcing me to slam on my brakes. Never do this. I had a black friend who lived in a very small, very white suburb. He was a very nervous weeaboo type. I'm driving past the cop station, get pulled over for a headlight that had just went out. No problem, just gonna get a fix-it ticket. So I'm calmly talking with the cop when he points to the passenger seat. What's up with your friend? My friend, who was a large dude, had his feet up on the seat and was trying to press himself up against the seat and passenger door, holding very still, as if he could blend in like a chameleon and not be seen. I exclaimed, oh my gosh, friend name, you're going to get us shot. Turned around to the cop, I'm sorry officer, he's nervous because he's the only black man in Cityname. Got away with the fix-it ticket. Not an officer, but as I was smoking in a park at night I saw flashlights coming up the path and quickly ate the remainder of my 5 grams joint. Unbeknownst to me, it was my uncle who is an officer in my city's small department. He obviously knew and luckily didn't tell my parents. Someone I know was pulled over and the cop asked him, you smoke chronic in here? And he just automatically blurts back, yeah. But not today. Needless to say, he got caught with weed in the car. Not a police officer, but I was in the 5th grade and my school had a resource officer and a police buddy of theirs at the school. I had 2 fidget spinners stolen that day, but I wasn't comfortable around cops or anybody in general. I decided since it was the last day of school I would make sure I got my spinners back. I went up to the officer and told them in the exact words, someone at the school is fidgeting with my spinners and I don't know who it is. I have never seen someone so confused in their life. Not my story. My dad was driving on the highway and some guy passed him going 20 over the speed limit. My dad put his bright red coffee cup on the dashboard on the cup holder and the speeder pulled over. My dad isn't a cop. He works for the Iowa Department of Ag and was driving a state vehicle with a state-issued license plate and stickers all over the car. The guy was going so fast he thought my dad was a cop. Not me, my brother. Someone was speeding and got pulled over. He didn't even have a license. Later found out he was a 15-year-old kid who took his mom's car, so he tried to act as if he was mentally challenged thinking it would help his case. I never saw it, but from the way my brother described it, it sounded funny. One time my brother, my dad, and I tied a water skiing rope to the back of our car during some heavy snowfall. We then towed my brother behind the car through the neighborhood on his skis sometime around midnight, so there'd be no traffic, and what few people were out were laughing their ashes off, with me in the backseat acting as spotter in case he fell down or stopped. And one point while driving up a hill we see police lights up ahead, at which point my brother drops the rope and uses his remaining momentum to go down an alley that's going downhill. Thing is, that alley was filled with crazy potholes, so there's my brother putting his ski racing skills to use avoiding potholes instead of gates. Not a police officer, but once I was smoking with friends and we finished and rode our bicycles for a while. We were like 13 at the time and we saw a police car and we were like, oh spit, they probably saw us smoking. And we just booked it to my place. They were not after us. Not a cop, but I like to go out at night and basically dong around and do stupid spit like but on a light up helmet and have friends push me around in a shopping cart. Teenage boy spit. I don't drink or smoke or vape or anything, but I've always been worried that some cop is gonna see me doing this spit and test me for like drugs or alcohol or something and it'll come out clean. What would he even do then? Is there a protocol for clean, sober kid acting like a dip spit in a CVS parking lot? Not a cop, but when I was a freshman in high school, we had a police officer come in and talk to us about drugs, sex, etc. etc. For some reason, the officer brought in a baggie of weed and a bong to show us what they looked like. The officer learned an important lesson that day: don't bring weed into a high school or it will get stolen by a bunch of dumbashes. Got me kicked out of Starbucks because they didn't feel safe. In probation, people would always answer the door with armloads of cleaning supplies or holding a broom or a mop or something when they very clearly had not been cleaning. I think it's a sort of psychological coping mechanism for the embarrassment of having strangers show up with the authority to inspect your house if they desire. Former civilian office employee who processed reports submitted by police officers. Two female officers had arrested a young male suspect for going equipped for burglary. The report detailed how from when he was handcuffed, and through the duration of searching him, he was visibly erect and sweating profusely. Me and cousin were on the way home from the pub one night when we came across two traffic cones. Safe to say the police couldn't believe their eyes when they came around the corner to find two 18-year-olds playing out a lightsaber battle in the middle of the road in darkness. We were suitably told off. Went to stop someone for loitering to commit a CDS offense. As we approached her, a nearby homeless lady yelled, "Tell him you were sucking dong." Well, I got pulled over once and the cop asked if I was drinking and I offered him my Snapple. I was getting off on 10-hour shift at 2 AM. This is my late grandfather's story. He pulled someone over and the man was screaming that a monkey was under the car pulling all the wires out. My late grandfather thought the man was on some very strong drugs, but he checked under the car anyway. It turns out that the man was right. There really was a monkey under the car pulling all the wires out. Not my story but my cousin's. He was working a late night near a Taco Bell. There was a disturbance in the store. He, being nearby, decided to go check it out. The moment the suspect saw the sirens, he was terrified, and when my cousin spoke to him he just shat his ash and said, "Whoopsie, that's the tacos." I still tease him about that to this day. I wish there was some way of automatically filtering the "I'm not a" from questions like these. I used small explosives to have fun and someone reported me. I sprinted like hell when I saw the police car, so they thought I was a terrorist or something and sent more units. I acted deaf when they catched me. Luckily they only took my explosives and released me. Americans scared of the people supposed to protect them. Niece of a cop here. My uncle once said he pulled a guy over who was very obviously drunk and wasn't driving right and said, "This isn't rocket science," referring to driving. The guy straight up said, "You're not a rocket doctor." Me, my sister, and my uncle are now part of a gang we made up where we are various types of cars, called the Rocket Doctors. I'm a Rainbow Prius, my uncle, a toy wooden dump truck, my sister is a pickup truck. Obligatory not a cop, but I was 18 and driving to Busch Gardens in Virginia with 3 other teens for a graduation present weekend. We needed to pee on the trip and accidentally turned off onto the Quantico agents only exit. There were Marines with machine guns like right there, and we roll down the windows and they step up to the car. One of them sees the cooler in the back and asks what's in it. We replied with candy bars and soda, which was true, and opened it to show them. They laughed at our sheepishness and told us this was the wrong exit, and we turned around. Thank gosh we hadn't been smoking weed before then. We had about an ounce on us at the time. Not an officer, but my story may fit here. My friend and I went to steal a street sign. It was all his idea and he had the tools, so I said fudge it. We had to take turns holding the other up to reach the top of the sign. He has the spitty sauce, all that isn't working. Cop pulls up behind us and we walk towards the patrol car. Officer steps out and asks what we are doing. My friend is apparently nervous as hell because he lies and says we were taking a piss. Like WTF? The both of us in the same darkened part of the road? No. I'm not backing that story up. I told the truth. Hell, the saw is right there for them to find. They took him in just for the night and let me go, for being honest. I got to drive his Mustang home. On the way back I ran a stop sign by mistake. Correctional officer. An inmate said something that was an oxymoron. So I told them that that was an oxymoron. They looked at me kinda funny and said, "What?" I told them again, "What you just said is an oxymoron." They responded all hostile, saying, "Excuse me? What did you just call me? Do you know what an oxymoron is?" They obviously didn't. Not a cop, but I spit my pants, literally. In B4, not a cop but got shot. Obligatory not a cop, but have a friend at an ISU football game. Get stopped for being a little tipsy and he was nervous as hell because he was underage. He just picked up a bag of weed and put it in his hat and put his hat on his head. His nervous tick was to scratch his head with his hat. So within 10 seconds of getting stopped his tick takes over and he drops the bag of weed between him and the 2 officers in front of him. LOL LXD. Intoxil is a technician. Had a guy sing karaoke into the breath sample tube instead of blowing. Thought he could America's Got Talent himself out of the arrest. Was a nice guy. He was way over the legal limit. Not a police officer, but at a mall park with a part of my school I literally stood to the side until the police and his canine left range. Once I was crossing the checkpoint and I was on bike and I forget my bike document copy at home and I nervous if they ask me to check your license and copy then what I do. But they did. Ask from me.